everyone, I am Dapper of Dapper Inspirations. Welcome back to the channel. And with that being said, let's get into it. First and foremost, guys, I just wanted to say a happy Valentine's Day to all of you lovely people. Whether you are in a relationship or you're single like me.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not.
I just wanted to say a happy Valentine's Day to all of you. But with that being said, let's dive into episode 9 of Dapper Thoughts, Crushes and Dating. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about fulfillment. Now, I think what I would say for anyone who is single, before you get into a relationship at all, or at least a dating relationship, is that you should be okay being by yourself first. Why do I say this? Why do I say that we should be okay being single? Because if we are not okay being single, then we are going to use that relationship for something. Take the example of someone who is lonely. If I'm a lonely person, I'm going to use that relationship to cure my loneliness. I'm going to use that relationship rather than be in that relationship. And I do think this is a problem because we shouldn't be using people, we shouldn't be using relationships, we should be in them. Now, another thing is that while we should find fulfillment in ourselves, we also should be finding fulfillment in God. The thing is, we need to find fulfillment in God before we find fulfillment in man. Because once we find fulfillment in God, we will find a greater fulfillment in relationships. We're not going to use that relationship for loneliness. We're not going to use that relationship for our own motivations. We're going to be in that relationship. Now, I think in my personal life, for 2 whole years, or just junior high in general, I was legitimately stressed out about whether or not I was going to find someone to date, find someone who liked me, or if anyone had a crush on me or anything like that. But as quarantine happened and all that, and as I started doing these YouTube videos, I found a greater fulfillment in God than I ever would have in a relationship or finding out if someone had a crush on me. Because those things aren't permanent. Those things don't last. But God does last. God lasts, and He will continue lasting through all eternity. And while relationships may come and pass, God will never leave you or abandon you, and He is a constant in all of our lives. Now, once you have found fulfillment in God, and once you've spent time with God when you're single, because truly, when we are single, that is the prime time to spend time with God. That is like the best time to spend time with God and to grow your relationship with God. Because the thing is, once you have found fulfillment in yourselves, then I would say you are ready to get into a relationship, a dating relationship. Now, when you get into a dating relationship, there are some things that you should be careful about. And I think the first thing you want to do when getting into a relationship is you want to get into a relationship that is God-honoring. Now, what does a God-honoring relationship or dating relationship look like? Now, I think a God-honoring relationship looks like a relationship that is obeying what God has told us to do, obeying what the commandments that God has given us, drawing the boundaries that God has given us in a Christian relationship, drawing those boundaries and obeying what God says. Now, I do think it is very important to set boundaries in relationships. And I think the first set of boundaries we should be setting is the ones that God wants us to set in relationships. And the second set is the ones we personally want to set in a relationship. Maybe you really don't like people joking about you. You don't take jokes very well. That could be a boundary in a relationship, that you don't want a person to joke about your appearance or how you talk or any of that. That could be a legitimate boundary you want to set up in a relationship. And I do think it is important that we set up those two types of boundaries in relationships. The personal boundaries that don't necessarily have to do with Christianity or God, but some stuff that we don't like in a relationship. And then secondly, we should be setting up the boundaries, or maybe even firstly, I would say firstly, we should be setting up the boundaries that God sets for us and obeying the rules he sets up for us. And he set up for us a long, long time ago. Now, I think this topic of getting into a God-honoring relationship and setting up boundaries really ties back to this theme of making God your foundation in your relationship. Now, I feel like when people talk about foundations in a relationship, I really turn to the parable about building a house on the sand. And I think for a lot of us, this parable can be related to our dating relationships. This parable of building a house on the sand, or building this house on a firm foundation, can relate to some of our dating relationships. Look at it this way. If we build a relationship on the rock, if we build a house on a firm, solid concrete foundation, it is much less likely when a storm comes that house will blow over. But if we build that same house on the sand, it is much more likely that when a storm comes, that it's gonna blow over. Now, I'm not gonna be reading the entire parable of the house on the sand for y'all, because I don't want to keep y'all here forever. But I'm going to be reading a verse from it, but if you are interested in this topic at all, I would recommend you go check out Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27, and in this portion, I'm just going to be reading verse 26. And that verse reads, "And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like the foolish man who builds his house on the sand." Now, what this verse is saying is that if we don't obey God's commandments, if we don't obey the boundaries that God set for us, it's gonna be like building a house on the sand. It's not gonna be strong. And the thing is, if we want to have a strong relationship, if we want to have a more serious and strong relationship, we should be making God our foundation. Why should we be making God our foundation? Because the foundation is a very important part of a building. While, yes, beachfront property is some of the most, the expensive property out there because it's beautiful. It's beautiful out there. It's pretty, it's nice. And we all, at the end of the day, want to have beachfront property because it's not only nice, it's expensive. But at the end of the day, a house that is built in the valley with a firm foundation is going to last a lot longer than a house on the sand. Especially if you live in especially if that house is put into a country or state where you get a lot of storms like hurricanes. Take the Florida beach property, that has been hit by hurricanes a lot because it was on the shore. It was on the shore, and those properties have been hit by hurricanes a lot because they're close to the ocean. They're close to the danger. They're close to the storms. So the question is, do we in our relationships want to risk it, take the chance, and build our house in the sand and be very close to the storm and hope and pray that the storm doesn't come? Or do we want to be smart about this and build our house on a firm foundation in the valley or somewhere that won't see storms? Now, granted that there are going to be many storms in our relationships. There are going to be storms, there are going to be hardships in our relationships. But when you have that firm foundation that is God, your relationship will be much stronger than it will be without it. Much, much, much stronger. So, do you want to build that house on the sand because it's pretty? Or do you want to build a firm foundation? Or build your house on a firm foundation because it will be strong? And I think this relates back to unequally yoked relationships. Do you want to get into an unequally yoked relationship because you have feelings for that person? You have feelings for that non-Christian? Or do you want to get into a relationship with a Christian that I promise you will be much stronger? Now, that doesn't guarantee that either of those relationships will work or fail. But you gotta hedge your bets here. You gotta make the best plays. Because I think relationship and life is kind of like a game of chess. And you have to make good moves or you're going to lose pieces. When you get into a tough situations, you're gonna want to have more powerful pieces just in case you weren't able to take down as many of the other person's pieces, those powerful pieces. And you're gonna want to make more careful moves, safer moves. And the safer move in life and the safer move with relationships is building your house, building a relationship on the foundation that is God. To wrap up, first and foremost, if you have not gotten into a relationship or you have, find fulfillment. Find fulfillment in God before you get into a relationship. Even if you have been in a relationship before and you're not in one, find fulfillment in God first. Because once you found that fulfillment in God, you can seek out fulfillment in man. Because once you have that foundation of God already set in your life, once you have that strong faith, then you can find people to help build that faith. Find a person to help build that faith. Secondly, we should be in God-honoring relationships. We should be following the commandments God set for us in regards to relationships. We should be obeying His commands. Thirdly, we should be setting boundaries that are respectful to all parties. Set up boundaries that are more personal. First and foremost, set up the boundaries that God wants you to set, then set up the boundaries that are more personal to you, that you personally don't like, that aren't necessarily having to do with God. And then to the final point of this is that we in all relationships and all dating relationships should be building a firm foundation. We should be using God's firm foundation in all our relationships to build off of. Because I promise you, your relationship will be stronger with that firm foundation than it ever would be without. And that is just going to about wrap it up for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed episode 9 of Dapper Thoughts. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, I'll be doing another video talking with some other people about this topic, and I'll be releasing that sometime this week. But until the next video, I'll catch you next time.